Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex. And today I want to do something a little bit different. I really like the ARPG genre, and I really like Marvel and DC. So I decided I would compare the two current ARPG genre mobile titles for both Marvel and DC. We have Marvel Future Fight in one corner and DC Unchained in another. Now, for fair warning, I'm only doing this for fun, so I'm not going to declare a winner at the end, but you can kind of listen and make your own conclusion based on what I'm saying and the facts that I present. But I just want to kind of lay out each strengths and weakness of each game. I've played one for about 3 years. Obviously, Marvel Future Fight has been around for a lot longer, but I've played DC Unchained for about 4 months now, even back to the closed beta, so I really couldn't have had any more time with the game if I wanted to. And of course it will improve over time, but I wanted to see where it stood right now, because of course we know Marvel and DC have been trying to duke it out in the box office for years, and one of them is ahead. Let's see how they fare in the ARPG kind of coliseum. So starting off with the roster size, kind of how many champions, how many heroes you have in your game, because this is an all-important factor for both franchises, since that is the basis of comics, that is the essence of the fun. How many heroes, which heroes, who can I play with? Marvel Future Fight comes in ahead of this one simply for the fact they've been around for so long. With 157 characters on the roster currently, they dwarf basically any other game, almost any other game, period. I can't think of another game that has more characters without having repeated characters in some sort of ranking system. On the other hand, we have DC Unchained, and although they haven't had a patch yet where they introduced new characters, they did start out with 30 characters, including some uniforms and things like that to differentiate themselves. So it's a good start, and they've kind of cut out maybe 20% of what they need to make to catch up to the likes of their Marvel counterparts. In terms of graphics, now again, this is a personal preference thing. Some people like cel shading, some people like things that look ultra realistic, some people like it to look a bit more dumbed down. But in terms of the detail and the attention to the design of the uniforms and the look of the characters, because a lot of this is being ripped straight out of the pages of the comics. I really love what Marvel does with Marvel Future Fight, and what Netmarble, the parent company, does with it. I think they're so true to the iconic views and kind of images of these characters that it's almost a take for take. And then when they introduce movie-related uniforms, it's just so vivid, and you can see, especially with the Infinity War stuff, it's hard to tell what's real and what's game. DC Unchained, on the other hand, is a little bit more artistic, and they like to make it look like a comic book, which I can also appreciate for different reasons. I do tend to think that the characters look a little flat. It looks like a lot of their armor or a lot of the pieces of their gear are glued on, and there's not a lot of 3D coming out for certain characters and certain parts. But I do still really enjoy what they do, and I especially like around the Lantern Core, they have the little outline of green or red or yellow depending on what kind of ring they're wearing. In terms of character customization, because this is a huge part of the ARPG experience, how can you change your characters, how can you upgrade them and build them so they go from 0 all the way up to hero? In Marvel Future Fight's case, they have a lot of different ways that you can do that. You can equip Uru, ISO 8 sets, obelisks, you have uniforms that add additional stats. There's lots of different things that you can do to customize your character the way you want them. On the flip side, DC Unchained takes a slightly different approach, but it's still pretty similar. They do have uniforms, but the uniforms are kind of transformative, and they have their own skills and stats. DC Unchained also has skill gear, which completely kind of changes things and allows you to customize your gear in very specific and unique ways. They also have a Valorium system, which looks very similar to the ISO 8 system, where you give them kind of these items to hold, and it will boost their attack or defense or their resource usage rates. And then they also have comic cards, which will be applied to each character individually, which kind of adds a nice little comic book tie-in for those of you that like to read and then play with the characters in game. As far as the stories go, the main storyline for each game, Marvel's has been an 8-chapter story that was then expanded to 10, then expanded to 12, then expanded to 13. So they've seen quite a few story expansions, and they've added in different realms, going to the Asgardians, going into space, and it's been a pretty wild ride. Overall, I think the story is okay, but I don't think if you're looking for a story-driven RPG that Marvel Future Fight is going to satisfy your need or that itch. On the other hand, DC Unchained, I think, did a wonderful job with their story. It's much shorter, but it's very cohesive, and it also has the duality of having a hero side and a villain side, which I think is a fantastic thing to explore. I think there may be too much restriction or too much play and emphasis on heroes and villains, and I think that might kind of spill over into other game modes where it's not as wanted as in the story. But I think for the story mode it works wonderfully, and you basically have the replayability of even just playing the same story again, same stages, but it feels different because the dialogue is new, the characters that you're using are totally different, and it feels like the outcome of the story is different even though it's kind of the same. Let me move on to PvP, an all-important yet all-difficult aspect of ARPGs, and kind of can be in some ways a make or break for the genre. I think neither game has really hit the mark on what a good PvP experience is. Marvel Future Fight has had timeline battle, they've experimented with live timeline or live PvP, and it kind of hasn't worked to varying degrees. On the other side, DC Unchained has their 3 modes of PvP which are identical. One, you face the AI, one, you face other character or other people in a live mode for no score, and then in the last one, the most competitive one, you face them and you do upgrade or downgrade your score depending on whether you win or lose, and you get some reward for doing that. But in both cases, the experience can feel kind of disjointed, it can be a bit laggy, and you don't really have the satisfaction of pressing your skills and always having them land and be effective. There is a lot of hit and miss gameplay there, so it's definitely an area where both games can see massive improvements. And then we have social play, and this is another really important aspect of the ARPG genre, but it's one that can be difficult to implement on mobile devices for certain kind of architectures. In Marvel Future Fight's case, the social play is pretty limited right now. We have co-op, but you can only invite people from your alliance, which is like a guild, or from WhatsApp. Unfortunately, WhatsApp requires a phone number, so it's extremely prohibitive and it's frankly invasive. They used to have additional programs allowed on there like Line, which only requires an email address, which was fantastic, but for some reason they've gotten rid of it, which has degraded the amount of and reduced the amount of social play available. There's also a few modes that involve your alliance and kind of teaming up together, including Alliance Conquest, but it's still something that you play you can kind of play in a vacuum and still have success with it, so it's not technically social. Finally, they have World Boss Invasion, which is totally social, and it's a fun way for you and 2 random people to jump in and fight one larger, kind of more extreme boss. But unfortunately for now, you can't choose who you play with. DC Unchained, on the other hand, only has one real social play right now, and that is the Unchained Mode. Thankfully, it is the most popular mode by far to farm for materials, gold, and cards, which are the main method of upgrading characters. So there's a lot of emphasis on Unchained. They have a spring event right now where it asks you over the course of I think 7 or 8 days to play Unchained 200 times. So they know their players like that, and they're kind of milking it for what it's worth, which is fair play. In terms of other game modes that kind of stand out, Marvel Future Fight does have Shadowland, which has been by far one of the most popular game modes to date. DC Unchained, on the other hand, has the I'm always going to get this name wrong, but the Mr. Mizdeplix new kind of wave mode, which is quite challenging but also quite fun. It also has a team training mode that is used to farm a lot of gold and allows you to boost up certain effects that you can imbue your team with as long as you have a certain team set up, or at least enough members of that kind of bigger team. So if you have kind of the Legion of Doom, and if you have at least 3 of those members on your main team, you will get that active bonus added to your team as an effect. In terms of end game content, I think this is another area where both games struggle a little bit. A lot of times with free-to-play games, you're balancing what's good for new players and how to get more of those to come into your game and kind of stay, versus the veterans and what you can do for them. A lot of the end game content in Marvel Future Fight recently has been upgraded, which is fantastic. The World Boss Ultimate got a change which has pushed it up to 99 stages of difficulty, which is bananas. DC Unchained, on the other hand, doesn't really have a lot of endgame aside from extremely difficult and punishing Unchained Hell mode, which is almost impossible to do right now. But they also have the Simulation Battle, which goes up to I think 36 stages, and that is quite challenging, asking for a team score of I think 6,700 for that final stage, which is definitely near kind of an end game roster of 3. Finally, we come to the store sales and then events and giveaways. For the store sales, in terms of like what you can get for money, I think that both games have a balance of things that are expensive and things that are more economical. I think having monthly packages that you can buy once and they have an effect for the whole month is a really great way of introducing smaller spenders to your game in a way that doesn't feel unfair and in a way that rewards them for a long time and keeps them playing. I don't think I can find anything in DC Unchained that matches the raw value of a Stark Stash in Marvel Future Fight, but it may go down as one of the best sales in any game, in any mobile title, period. So they kind of have that going for them. In terms of events and giveaways, Marvel Future Fight, as I said earlier on in the video, is in their 3rd year anniversary, and it's also Infinity War time. So they're just throwing gifts left, right, and center. We've had more giveaways, more login events, and we're currently in a 56-day login event. More than I can count, more than I can keep track of. It's just raining free stuff, which is great. DC Unchained, on the other hand, has responded to the feedback of the community, which is great, and they recently patched in a login event for 30 days, which is going to recur and is good and has nice rewards, and also the spring event, which I mentioned earlier that they're doing kind of to play catch up with some of the Spring Blossom stuff that's already happened in other games. So overall, I think that both games bring something different to the table, but they do have a lot of similarities, and I'm very curious and interested to continue following both games and seeing how they evolve in the coming months, and maybe to see if there's some competition between the two later on down the line. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below of both games. Maybe let me know which one you would prefer to play if you could only choose one. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my content. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.